All right, so welcome to another episode, another edition of Trends You Cannot Ignore. And I have the great pleasure of bringing on somebody I like to call a friend. He may not agree with that, but a longtime friend of mine. I feel like we've kind of traveled in the same circles for many, many years now. David Meerman Scott is the author of New Rules of Marketing and PR, now in its 47th edition, I think it is. How many times he's revised and updated it. His newest book called Fanocracy, which I'm going to put a link in the chat to because you guys better go buy it, because David's given us this time today. Show your love by picking up a copy of Fanocracy. David, welcome to the show.
John, thank you. Absolutely, you're a friend. What's interesting is I think we started doing this writing, speaking, working with people to help grow their marketing thing around the same time.
Yeah.
And travel the same circles. And I'm fortunate to have seen your wonderful footwear choices up close and personal, I don't know, a dozen times. So yeah, we're buddies for sure, John.
So we'll get into what you're working on now, but I did want to inquire, somebody who has had the wonderful good fortune of being able to work with two of my daughters. You wrote your last book with your daughter, Reiko. So talk maybe just a minute about what that was like.
I did. And it was a remarkable experience. The way it happened is I really wanted to write a book about fandom, and I wanted to really dig into how and why people become fans of something. So I started interviewing people about what they are a fan of, and people are fans of rock bands and sport. Hey, let's have some fun here. Go put into the chat, if you would, for everyone to see what it is you are a fan of. So please, everybody, right now, go ahead and put into chat what you're a fan of. It could be a rock band, a sports team, a sport you like to play, a hobby, whatever it might be. So I'm curious to see. Peloton, music, the National. Gee, I like the National too. Fanocracy. Thank you so much, John. It's very kind of you. Traveling, Star Trek, reading, NFL and college basketball, wine. And this is what happens when I ask people. People get excited about vinyl records, woodworking. People get excited about the things that they love, the things that they're a fan of. And then I started talking with companies about how they build fandom. And some people look at me, stare at me blankly, like they have no clue. And I started to talk with Reiko. This would have been about 6 years ago. So at the time, she would have been 22. Started to talk with Reiko. Well, tell me about millennials. What are you into? What's the younger generation into? Reiko, obviously a female, obviously. A very different generation than me, but she's mixed race. My wife's Japanese. So lots of real different aspects. She's also a scientist, did a neuroscience degree at Columbia University. She's now an emergency room doctor at Boston Medical Center. And so we're really different people. And he started telling me all of these things, and I was writing it down and recording her. And he said, well, don't be an idiot. You should write this book with her. So she and I got together and spent 5 years of our life researching, writing, editing, promoting this book, Fanocracy. And it was a super awesome experience, as you, I'm sure, had similar experiences, John, where the only way it was going to work is if we eliminated the father-daughter dynamic. Right. I couldn't be the boss. Yeah. She had to be able to be comfortable telling me my writing stinks and it needs to be edited. She had to be comfortable telling me that no matter, I know, Daddy, you love this story, but it stinks and it has to go. It cannot be a part of this book. So it actually made us closer for that reason. Yeah. It was a fabulous experience. I'm sure you had something similar.
Yeah, just what you said, forget that daughter. Well, that takes years to break down because, she's been spending years telling you what a brilliant writer you are. And so, that dynamic's a tough one. But I think you're right. You grow closer because you realize that your common bond actually allows you to disagree and still realize that it's about the disagreement and not about, the person or the emotion. That's it. Right. But it's a beautiful thing.
And the other thing that was super interesting was when we first started writing, we wrote about, I don't know, what would have been 100 book pages or so, as a unified voice. And it just wasn't working because our voices were so different. And we finally realized, 100 pages in, that we needed to break it down. And she wrote her chapters. I wrote my chapters. We edited each other, of course. And we used a common format for putting the chapters together, but it was way better when her distinct personality was able to shine through and my distinct personality was able to shine through. That was a way, way, way different way of putting the book together than trying to make it one unified voice, which was how we originally started. So a bit of a false start, but fortunately we backtracked and rewrote all those bits, and it made the book way, way, way better. Truth be told, she's a better writer than me. And she's a very different writer. She's way more lyrical. I'm like declarative sentence period, declarative sentence period. She's like more about thoughts and feelings. And so it was great to have those two unique voices.
Yeah. So the blending of those two voices probably it made for a better book in some ways, or at least a more approachable book for some people.
Yeah, no, it was great. Super fun.
So let's get right to the money question. What trend should we not be ignoring right now in your view, or what are you watching and paying attention to?
Well, I think after having lived through what we all lived through over the past year and a half, that what we're doing right now, using video, is so important. And I think that leading up to the pandemic, video was out there. Zoom existed. Videos on website existed. YouTube was a channel. TikTok was just gaining popularity. Instagram had just started focusing in earnest on video. But it was really the pandemic, I think, that threw us very much into this concept of video. And actually, Reiko and I did an analysis of why this trend is so important. And this, ironically, was before the pandemic happened, because the book published January 2020, 2 months before the pandemic started. And we actually did an analysis, and going behind me for my prop, we did an analysis of the neuroscience of what goes on in our brain when we see video. And it's super important stuff, because your brain is actually processing video as if you're in the same room as the person. And it, because of a concept called mirror neurons, the part of our brains that fire when we see somebody doing something as if we're doing it ourselves. I'll demonstrate with my lemon and my slice of lemon. If I take a bite of the lemon, wow, it makes my mouth pucker up and my lips, I can feel it on my lips and my tongue, my eyes close. It's super powerful to bite into a lemon and my brain is firing. But if you're watching me, and even if you're just hearing me, you are probably tasting a lemon too. And
I'm puckering.
It's crazy. And that comes from mirror neurons. And the same thing is in action when you see me on video. It feels as if we're in the same room, even though intellectually, you didn't bite that lemon, and intellectually, you're not in the same room with me. And this is precisely why we feel we know a movie star, even though we know we've never met a movie star, or you've never perhaps met John in person or me in person, yet you feel like you know us. And so we should all be thinking about how, when we do our marketing, when we do our sales, when we do our connections with other people for business, that video is not going away. I think the pandemic helped us to understand even more how important it is. That is a trend I think we cannot ignore.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, I'll piggyback on that in a lot of ways, that because for a lot of people, they experienced a ton of video doing this in Zoom, right? But I think that another thing that I see is I don't know if this is a trend or if this was just a realization that we needed to get back to it, was if we're not going to be meeting in person, then maybe we need to be meeting in smaller groups in video. Maybe we need to be doing, instead of so many presentations of basically me talking to many, maybe 10 of us need to get together and brainstorm an idea, roundtable an idea. Right. I'm seeing a lot of hunger for that.
I am too. And in fact, I've joined a group,
Right.
and some people use the term mastermind, but I
Right.
joined a mastermind group with a dozen people or so. All of us have written a book and are on the speaking circuit. And we sort of hash out ideas that are common to our really weird, quirky way of earning a living. And it's a small group and it's really fun and interesting. We do it on Zoom, but that is a really intimate kind of experience. And it's very surprising, I think, unless you deeply think about this, that that can be very, very intimate.
Yeah.
John, I think you know that I speak at Tony Robbins
Yeah.
Business Mastery events. And the Business Mastery events are in person prior to the pandemic, 2,500 people in a room. And I always felt like this was an intimate experience. You know, Tony Robbins was on the stage. I get a 2-hour time slot. There's some other guest speakers. But it wasn't until it went virtual that it felt even more intimate, because Tony is talking directly to us through that camera right there. And he's got a fabulous, multi-million-dollar studio. So it's not like he's sitting in his living room talking on Zoom. It's an amazing studio.
Yeah.
And I go down to Palm Beach for when they're doing one of these virtual events, so I can participate from the studio myself. But many, many, many participants commented that it's a more intimate experience, which is ironic because you're not in the same room with Tony Robbins or me. You're experiencing it over video, but done well, video is an intimate experience.
I think that's a great point, because I've heard people actually say that a lot of speakers who were used to being on a stage actually had to change or adapt, or they weren't as good in some ways because they were so used to the spotlight is on me, you're all listening to me now. Whereas really the best presenters in the virtual environment actually realized that now it's one-to-one.
Yeah.
It's not one-to-many. It's like I'm having a conversation with you now because I'm not this little tiny guy up on the stage.
That's right. And before you were competing against somebody ducking out of the convention center and going down to the Starbucks. Now you're competing against somebody minimizing a window and checking out email or jumping onto social networks. That's more of a challenge as a speaker to have people pay attention when their distractions are literally right there on the same screen they're using to watch you in action.
So a number of virtual events that I've participated in recently, the ones that are done really well, almost view it more like a TV production.
Yeah.
So just like those things, like how do TV stations, how do TV shows keep people engaged? Well, they go right into the next speaker. They don't take breaks. They, they just do a lot of things to keep you hooked, because
every 4 or 5 minutes there's a change. There's one presenter talking to the camera, perhaps reading from a teleprompter. Then you've got 2 presenters having a conversation. Then there's an in-studio interview. Then there might be a taped section that was done previously that they record. The sports, the weather, and whatnot. John, I'm not sure if you know, but I'm going to my props over here. I wrote a book called Standout Virtual Events that came out in September about this whole idea of virtual events. And that was one of the most surprising things we found, is that an in-person event is about theater, and a virtual event is about a theatrical experience, a television experience. And you nailed it. It's much quicker, it's faster cuts, it's using the different tools. Like I asked you to put at the top of the show into chat what you're a fan of. When you do a good virtual presentation, you use as many of those features, the polling feature, if it exists, the breakout room feature, the chat feature, whatever these features are, and you'd pre-record a video. When I present on Fanocracy, Reiko and I will do a video a couple of days before, maybe 5 minutes, so that people have a chance to see her as part of the presentation, which I then play as a video, kind of like a television show going to the videotape of a recorded segment that was done previously. And those kinds of virtual events can be super interesting.
So I was going to ask you about the Tony Robbins experience because I was familiar. I knew that you participated in those. Here's my question, and you may say nothing. I doubt.
Mhm.
I doubt that you will. But you've spoken on a lot of stages before, as have I. I don't know that I've ever seen an audience like what he does to an audience.
Yeah.
Um, would you say that you learned anything from speaking to his audience, not just from being around him and watching what he does, but 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 in from his audiences? Do you feel like you've learned anything?
Oh, without a doubt, it's made me a way better speaker. I've learned a ton. First of all, almost everyone who's there is paying their own way,
Yeah,
and it's an expensive ticket.
yeah,
The entry level Unleash the Power Within program had typically been done in basketball arenas. It
yeah.
was an enormous event. And I think that the entry level ticket might be $995. And it goes up to, I think if you wanted to be in the front section, it might be, I don't know, $2,500 or something like that. I'm rough guess on the
Yeah,
pricing.
yeah,
But business mastery is $10,000 to be in the room. And again, because it's mostly entrepreneurs who go there, most people, not all, but most people are paying their way. It's not like a
yeah,
corporation is
yeah.
picking up the tab. So people play, and this is the term that Tony uses, play full out.
Hmm.
And if there's a dance break, people get up and dance. If people are high-fiving one another. And Tony does some things that I've never seen any other events do. He lights the entire audience.
Yeah,
The entire audience is lit as if it's a studio audience, and in fact it is.
yeah,
And very often the camera turns and Tony, and I've done this too, will interview people in the audience. So it becomes a participative experience. When he went virtual, everyone else was like, oh my God, what do we do? Doing video, doing virtual events from their office, doing a virtual event, maybe buy a couple of cameras, but Tony spent millions on a studio. It's he has built a 50-foot round, 20-foot high LED wall,
I've seen pictures.
and
Yeah.
with like 6 or 8 cameras and lights and sound, and as I'm presenting as a presenter, I'm looking out to quite literally a sea of over 1,000 boxes. Each box is a participant.
Yeah.
I can see their name. And, if I want to engage with, say, Alex Molina, here I am. Hey, Alex, how's it going? And I'm talking to Alex right there on the screen. And I had never seen anything remotely like it. It was, Tony is just really sort of reimagined what's possible. And I think that was the key for anybody who had success in this new virtual event world is don't just take what you're used to and cram it into a Zoom room. Instead, totally reinvent what it is that you're doing for the environment that you're making it work in.
And what does stage speaking look like for you the next 6-8 months? Are you booking fall events? Are you just going to get out of the game completely? And
well, I've got a couple tentatively booked, but some of them the dates have just continued to move. I don't know about you, John, but I had a few that were scheduled for summer or fall of 2020, and then people said, "Oh, we'll be back in 6 months. Let's just push it forward by 6 months." Other people said, "Oh, we'll be back in 9 months. Let's push it forward by 9 months." But none of those are happening.
No, right.
Now I think people are being super cautious. So I've got a few groups that have got me tentatively booked. In other words, we've got a contract, we just don't have a date yet. I've got other events where they said, let's just postpone, but we haven't chosen a new date yet. So I think I've got, I don't know, 10 or so that are booked, formally booked in some way, but without dates. I don't believe I have any either hybrid or I think I got one hybrid that's booked. And I've noted, I don't know if you have noticed this trend, John, but I've noticed a trend where hybrid events, where there is an in-person audience, but it's also being broadcast. And they're treating the in-person audience almost like as a television program,
Right, like a
like
studio
as an
audience.
Oprah show, or
Yeah.
Ellen DeGeneres show or something. And it's the VIP audience is local in person, whereas everybody else is virtual. But because so many people around the world have been able to participate in these events, let's take Tony Robbins again as an example. If you lived in Pakistan, it is a big deal to get to a Tony Robbins virtual in-person event. It's expensive. You have to take, as much as 2 weeks out of your life. It's a huge logistical challenge to move your body halfway across the planet. Yet with virtual, you can just turn it on and you're good to go. So I think virtual is here to stay, and hybrid will become something that I think will be super important for people.
I'm participating in a couple very large events, have been traditionally large events that are hybrid. Both Content Marketing World and Traffic and Conversion are both doing hybrid. So we'll see what that's going to
be
end up being
interesting.
like.
I think it's the way of the future, but I think what's super important for the organizers who are putting those events together is not just to do what people had done in the past, which is have an in-person event and then televise it.
Yeah.
I think it truly, the virtual part has to be interactive, has to be two-way, has to use interactive features. The presenters need to engage with the audience in the way we are right now. It can't just be, like broadcasting the Super Bowl. It's not going to work.
Well, and I think that you're also going to see some of these events, the speakers will be virtual in some cases.
Yeah.
So there'll be speakers on stage and there'll be people that are there, and the same reason. Logistically, maybe now I get a $50,000 speaker to agree to a virtual slot for, something that's, much more affordable. So I think you're going to see some of that.
I do too. Absolutely.
So what are you working on next? What's next for you? Just like you showed me that your virtual events book, that just kind of popped up. So
that virtual events book was like, it was, when was it? May, June. It was probably June of last year, almost a year ago. And I was thinking, wow, no one's nailed this except for Tony Robbins. No one's nailed this virtual event thing.
Yeah.
Let's research it, figure it out. And I worked with a co-author, Michelle Manaffi. She puts on events and I speak at events. So we just worked together on this thing, banged it out super fast, 2 months. It's a short book. It's only 100 pages. And got it out using Amazon Publishing. 2 weeks after the manuscript was done, the book was literally, the physical book was in people's houses. So super fast way to publish. Working on the 8th edition, not the 256, the 8th edition of the New Rules of Marketing and PR. That book first came out in 2007. Now in the 7th edition, I'm working on the 8th. And it's interesting because the book continues to sell. It's used in hundreds of universities as a text, but things are constantly changing. The current edition, the 7th, does not include things like Clubhouse and other audio technologies. So I'm constantly having to update the book based on what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a place where we're going to transition to, if one of you or more of you want to bring yourself on camera and have just been dying to ask David Meerman Scott a question, or just say hi to him. You're a fan, that's allowed, all allowed. But I'm going to ask you a question while people are just raise your hand or something, or just, jump on. But I'm going to ask you a question that has been on my mind.
Oh, please.
So Fanocracy, one of the things in Fanocracy is your sort of additional admission of your love of the Grateful Dead. And as you know,
and you can see my
I see it fairly well, right? Yeah, and your Dead posters. And of course, you wrote a book with Brian Halligan on a mutual love of the Grateful Dead. So I have to know, what is your favorite Grateful Dead album, at least non-bootlegged album? Let's say studio album.
Okay, studio album. I'd have to go with Working Man's Dead. It's so different from what they had done in the past. It's a very sort of country music kind of album.
Uncle John's Band, one of my favorite songs.
You got it, John. And those tunes have held up. And, I saw my first Grateful Dead concert when I was 17. And in the last 2 months, they've put on two different sets of tickets. They announced, first thing they did was announce that they're doing their traditional Mexico run. So they announced 6 dates in Mexico. I bought tickets for 3 days. Three of them. There's two separate weekends. I bought tickets for one of the weekends. That's a $5,000 ticket and includes 3 nights, 4 nights hotel, food, and the tickets to the 3 shows. And the band sets up literally on the beach in Mexico. And it's the entire resort, 5,000 rooms or some crazy number of rooms, is all Grateful Dead fans. It's a nutty experience.
I bet.
And then they just announced their tour, which will be August through, I think it's August or October, if I'm getting it right. So I bought tickets to the Boston shows. I'm likely to go to a couple of the other shows. So I spent, of course, I got the best seats like an idiot,
Sure.
like I normally do. So, I've spent way over $100,000 on the Grateful Dead in my lifetime. And just this year, I think I've spent $7,000 on the Grateful Dead. So it's amazing how when you become a fan of something that you just keep stepping up. And, they've been a part of my life since I was 7. Well, my first show when I was 17, part of my life since I was 15. So keep going, keep doing it.
It's funny you mentioned Working Man's Dead. That was their 4th album, maybe, or so. And
Something like that, yeah.
same year they came out with what is my favorite album, American Beauty.
Yes,
which was very similar.
People pair them because
Yeah. Had a similar vibe to them, but I would make a case for that could be a greatest hits. I mean, friend of the devil. I mean, would it be on a lot of greatest hits albums for people with for the Grateful Dead?
Yeah, and I'm so I could geek out. We could do a separate show on the.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry I took.
They did a couple of they reissued both of those albums, but with a whole bunch of outtakes. It's really interesting to hear the band members as they were working through those songs to make them right. Yeah. It's going to be really geeky to listen to outtakes songs. But if you are, it's super interesting.
All right, so who's got a question for David? And don't sit here in this awkward silence and make him wonder if you guys were even listening. Just go ahead and jump on. I know a bunch of you mentioned that you were really excited for this because you've been fans like me of David for a long time. So just unmute your camera and don't be a chicken.
Be a chicken. And I have another idea for a trend you can't ignore if we want to go there, John.
You can. Sometimes these guys are shy. Sometimes
they weren't shy putting in what they're a fan of.
I know,
People love to do that.
If you feel more comfortable putting your question in chat and having me read it to David, I'm happy to do that too. All right, go with your second or another trend.
So, John, I've been thinking a lot about how the pandemic has made so many people, not everyone, but many people, kinder. We all had to live with this. We had to live with each other in new ways. We had to be respectful of people in different ways. We had to be supportive of people in different ways. My co-author in Fanocracy, Reiko, works in emergency medicine, and she's treating ill people. Some of them have COVID, and they're very, very sick. And I think this idea of kindness and generosity, which I've seen more of over the last year, I'm just hoping that that's a trend we can't ignore, a trend that continues. Yeah. The idea of just however much money I can make is the most important thing. I didn't feel that over the last year or so. Yeah. I felt people, in my case, I would support my local restaurants that I know were struggling and buy takeout, even if I didn't want to buy takeout again that week. I'd go and do it anyway and leave a big tip. And I don't know. I don't know if you feel the same, John, but I hope that kindness and generosity sticks around.
Well, one of the things I saw, to put it in, I wholeheartedly agree. One of my favorite things was you saw neighbors, because we couldn't get close to anybody anymore. So you saw neighbors standing out on their driveways. I played a couple of concerts, on my porch. Nice. And I think there was a revitalization, I think, of some sort of traditional neighborhood ideas. But I think to put it back in a business context, I think I think we saw a lot of business owners say, crap, we we have to stop taking our customers for granted.
Yeah.
We have to be more meaningful in their life. We have to get closer to them. And I think that, that's always been a good idea, right? But I think a lot of people, it just really shone a light on that idea of, getting closer to your best customers. And I think that, I think we've gotten very much in the, how can I blast? How can I automate? How can I, how can I use technology so I never have to talk to anybody anymore?
Yeah, right.
And,
Right.
and I hope we've turned that back a bit.
I hope so too. And I think that for those organizations who are embracing this and adopting this, it is a way to build fans. People want to do business with people, and the whole automation thing, yeah, everyone wants to figure out how to take the human out of the equation, but that's not how you build fans. Humans are an important part of the equation.
Yeah, no question. So I'm going to give one more chance for questions, and if we don't have any, we'll let David go on his way. I know he has another meeting as well, and we're all keeping busy. So going once, going twice.
Hey, John.
There we go. Hey, Bobby.
This is Bobby. Hey, David, how are you? I told John this a while back. I'm gonna get all fanboy on you. I bought your first book I'm assuming that's your first book, and when it came out back in 2007.
Thank you.
And I've only picked up about 30 or so of the newest editions, but I'm kidding. But I do need to get the most recent one. And yes, it's one of those books that obviously, someone else said this once when they wrote a book and I spoke to them about it. They said it was probably out of date by the time it got published.
Yeah.
And I suspect with what you're working with, which kind of segues into my question. I work primarily with smaller businesses, just because that's where my heart and passion is, even though I know that's not where most of the money is. But that being said, I know a lot of my clients struggle with, when it comes to, say, marketing, for example, they struggle with where to put the few resources that they have. And there's always, for a small business owner, there's always this push to everything is online, everything's social media, and so on and so forth. But my gut feel is that there's got to be a balance between what we might call more old school analog type of marketing efforts and balancing that with what's really essential online. And I know it's kind of vague, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
specifically
sure.
Around the smaller business owners with more limited resources?
Absolutely. And thanks for being there in the very beginning, Bobby, in 2007. And the interesting thing about that book was when it came out, it was obsolete when it came out, because when I was writing it, Twitter had not yet launched. When it came out, Twitter started to take off, and people would come up to me, David, great book, but why did you forget Twitter? And I'm like, I didn't forget it. So I realized pretty quickly I have to update this thing a lot. I think going back to what I said earlier, the whole idea of kindness and generosity, both online and offline, is a super great way for small businesses to become successful. Let me give you a very concrete example. This morning at 6 a.m., I woke up at 3 because I had to get my exercise in. I exercise every day in order to drive my new tricked out 4-wheel drive Mercedes-Benz Sprinter camper van to Connecticut, which is a 2.5-hour drive, to visit a very small business called Rome Rigs, which is putting in a $10,000 upgrade to my electrical system. Now, I tell you this, and this camper van is my obsession. My wife laughs at me about I become obsessed by things, and I've become obsessed by this camper van. She actually loves it too. We were in Acadia National Park for 4 days this past week, and a long weekend, and she loves the thing. So we have a great time in it. But I'm just simply upgrading the electrical system so that I can be off grid for a week rather than just 4 days. And the way that I found Rome Rig and the owner, whose name is Aaron, and he runs it with his wife, just the two of them, was that Aaron is in the group on Facebook that I go to learn about tricked out Mercedes Sprinter camper vans. You know, it's this little tiny niche. It's about this big, this niche. And the niche of electrical systems to tricked out Sprinter camper vans is an even tinier niche. You know, you got to really get out your telescope to see that niche. But Aaron has built his entire business simply by being helpful. Anybody who asks any questions about electricity in camper vans, Mercedes-Benz camper vans, will get an answer from Aaron on Facebook. And sometimes he will reach out by direct message and give his personal cell phone number. You know, I remember distinctly someone on Facebook said, "Oh my God, help, my electrical system crashed and it's cold out and I don't have any heat." And within 5 minutes, Aaron says, "Here's my number, call me." And they had sorted it out in 5 minutes. And I just drove down today and wrote him a check for $10,000, which I never would have done unless he hadn't been helpful to our group, to the group that I'm a member of. And I think every single one of us can do that in our business. Or if, like you, Bobby, we're advising other businesses within the businesses that we advise, you know, have people be helpful. Don't try to sell people something. If Aaron had tried to sell me a $10,000 upgrade to my camper van, I would have laughed in his face. But because he was so helpful in explaining what electrical systems do over the last year, I said, shoot, I need me an upgraded electrical system. And of course, there's only one place on the planet I would ever go to do that. Long, rambling answer to your simple question, but be helpful, educate and inform instead of interrupt and sell, both online and offline, and it works for every kind of business.
That's a great story, David. I suggest that Facebook group is going to cost you a fortune. because somebody's going to talk about the $20,000 upgrade.
Well, my electrical system is sorted, but John, I just decided I'm going to get a bigger gas tank.
Oh yeah.
Because the Sprinter vans are designed as delivery vehicles. It's like an Amazon delivery vehicle, essentially the base van. And I want to drive it far. I drove 300 miles from my house to Acadia National Park last week, and I had to fill up 3 times. So I'm going to have an upgraded gas tank, and you know, it's another ridiculous amount of money, but it's like, I don't know what it is. It's like a teenager. You just keep paying because that's what you do.
Right. Hey, Charles, do you have a question? I see you have your hand raised, or Linda. I'm not sure which one of you or both of you are on.
Yes, I do. I was, video is not coming on for some reason, but so David, you and I actually met a few years back. I did a quick interview with you back in 2014. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
My question for actually anyone, and both of you today, though, is with this whole iOS 14 and you know, tracking going away. What trends do you see with that? What's going to be the workaround? What's going to be the new thing to, you know, to track or to cookie folks and add them to your list or to retarget them other ways?
You know, I'm not an expert, nor am I someone who talks about ways to pay to generate attention. There are many people who are super smart about all that. You know, how do you effectively use Facebook and Instagram and other platforms to spend money to generate attention? What I love myself is more around the idea of how can you get attention for free, like this guy Aaron at Rome Rig. Now, I recognize that you can use tracking in other ways, like, you know, if somebody goes on my website and I happen to use HubSpot, I'm an advisor to HubSpot, I happen to use HubSpot for my website, and somebody comes on the site, the tracking features allow me to know whether that person has been on my site before and so on. So that's super valuable. But as a way of optimizing advertising, I'm not able to comment on that.
Well, and I would just say, Charles, I don't think there's going to be a workaround necessarily. You know, people gravitate towards certain practices because they are cost effective. In some cases, they're easy. In some cases, there's not as much competition in them. And so that's where a lot of your practices, I think, like that develop. And to some degree, what it's caused is that type of practice to get much more expensive. Facebook advertising has skyrocketed in some cases because you're not going to have the retargeting, which was much cheaper because you're now marketing to a smaller group of people. So at that point, I think people are going to make the decision to do the thing that is the most cost effective, the most effective in general. And I think some of what David's talking about is really, it's in some ways it's going to force people into that, because I do think that whether the consumer can wake up on day one and say, that's how I want to be marketed to or not, it is how they want to be marketed to. And so I think that it's basically just closing, marketers ruin everything. It's basically just, closing some of the ways that marketers ruin things.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing. If you were to ask 1,000 people about tracking with an iPhone, 995 of them aren't going to have a clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so if they have to click a radio button that says I do or don't want to be tracked, probably way more than 900 won't ever push that button.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah.
I actually feel like in addition to that going away, I mean, we've all seen things be advertised, great copy, only to get it, and it's pretty crappy. So it feels like to me that this is going to force everyone to, improve and increase their chops so that what's actually being delivered is truly valued by the recipient. And, hopefully that'll cause some, some word of mouth promotion for it as well, versus just an advertising cookie.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, David,
Thanks for your feedback, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for joining us today. Dave, we're going to have to let you go. I appreciate it very much. Hopefully you and I can run into each other when we get back out there on the road again sometime.
Yeah, John, I certainly hope so too. I think it seems like we've been at the same event at least once a year for more than a decade. So I'm hoping that'll continue. And thanks for having me on. And it's great to connect with everybody. Good luck going forward. And hopefully this whole weird part of our lives will be ending soon.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks,
you're welcome anytime out in Colorado at my place, and I'll next time I'm coming
maybe
through the Cape.
My camper van is called Isabella. Maybe I'll drive Isabella out and park in your driveway for a little while.
That'd be awesome. All right. Take
Thanks.
care. Thanks everybody. See ya.